Hey, Strong Girls. I'm Molly Herford, sports journalist, ultrarunner, cyclist, and author, and founder of Strong Girl Publishing.
And I'm Dr. Sasha, executive director of Yellow Running Shoes, a researcher, engineer, elite runner, and your BFF who's breaking down the science of smashing barriers in women's sports.
Think of us as the intersection of science and culture for women and girls in sport. Each week, we'll dissect the latest headlines and cutting-edge research on female athletes.
Debunk myths about girls in sport. Talk about how hormones affect performance at every age, to the latest research in sports science around mental performance, nutrition, equipment, and so much more.
And we'll spotlight badass girls and women who are rewriting the rules of the game, sometimes literally.
Expect it to be nerdy.
And occasionally TMI.
But it will always be honest.
Whether you're a strong girl yourself or you're raising one, this show is for you. Welcome to Strong Girl Talk,
where sports science meets sisterhood.
Hello. Welcome back to Strong Girl Talk. Sasha, it is so lovely to see you, and it is so lovely to see you looking so happy that you're actually like on the verge of tears because you're finally getting to do a walking errand.
I did a walking errand, Molly. And just like, okay, fangirling you for being so supportive through this journey of, it's been challenging and I don't always show up as my best self, but you bring out the best in me. So just thank you.
Oh my God, we bring out the best in each other. I think we can definitely safely say that. I feel like I don't know what I did without you in my inbox and in my text message box. Honestly, I'm like, what was I even doing with my life before?
Rubbing the dog's belly. You were rubbing DW's belly.
That's pretty much all I do anyway. Yeah. But now I do it while I'm looking at my phone at your messages. Yeah. So, we have a great episode today. We're talking to Kelly Brush of the Kelly Brush Foundation. But before we do that, let's hit our sports roundup. And, in this section, we don't just talk about sports. We're also talking about research that's interesting, stuff that's going on in the industries that's interesting to us. For you, what's your biggest highlight of the week? What's the most interesting thing for you right now?
Oh my gosh, it would be the launch of the ASICS shoe. So the Tokyo Speed race. ASICS has launched what is now the lightest shoe on the market. And I love this for so many reasons. And I'm pretty sure ASICS is already starting to do some research on so super shoes are made for male feet, right? And they're really starting to think about how do we do this differently? And I really think that it's called the Metaspeed Ray. So it's got half a plate. So I think it's a little less aggressive. I mean, if we think about female bodied people, I think it's easier on their knees. I did get up and watch the Tokyo Speed Week at 6 a.m. and then go immediately into Diamond League and then immediately into the Vuelta. So another great weekend of watching sports for me. But yeah, this blend of racing meets technology. That's my highlight. What about you?
I mean, we got to talk about the Vuelta, the women's Vuelta's drama with the team time trial. So it's I have a good and bad with the Vuelta. The bad being this team time trial. Say that 10 times fast. Just absolute BS. So two teams did not get to start on time because the UCI hadn't finished the bike checks. Because I believe there's only one or two officials, so way less officials than needed to do the bike checks. And to make matters worse, they didn't change the they didn't address that in the rankings. They just said whoops, too bad. Putting, the team, the Visma Lease bike team at a huge disadvantage, which is a big deal because they're, one of the top teams. It would be a big deal with any team, but it's a particularly big deal when you're talking about a race that's probably going to come down to seconds and a team that very much is quite in contention for the win here. So just infuriating because if it happened at the Vuelta a España, the men's race, can you imagine the outcry that would have happened?
Well, and so I've been following this as well. And so what was interesting was there was only 3 minutes between each of the starts. And I was like, that seems too short, and especially in a TTT. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 7 cyclists set off at a time. Yeah. So imagine then you have so you have 3 teams and they're trying to pass, just way too dangerous. The men's race wouldn't have been that tight. They would have started them in longer. Oh, sorry, hold up. It's not just bikes, it's team cars, right? In professional cycling, there's team cars. And I think then there's this pressure for the women to have to respond on social media in a way that calls the UCI up and in and not out. And so PFP, we're both total fangirls on her. Her post was great. But at the same time, I was like, is there this pressure on the women to have to post in a certain way because we should feel so lucky. I say this sarcastically that we get to race the Vuelta, right? Like, anyways, I'm yeah, wholeheartedly with you on that one.
You're completely right. I find that very frustrating because, yeah, I mean, it's the same thing in corporate culture, right? If a woman speaks up, she's a B word. If a guy says the same thing, he's a great leader. It'd be the exact same thing. If a men's race, if this happened, all of the men on the team would be posting just like, this is unacceptable. This is garbage. Like, they would have been calling it out, and everyone would have been like applauding that. If the women do it, they're whining. Absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah.
Ah, double standards.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep. But my
let's
like
talk about the positive. We got to talk
my
about the positive.
positive. Mariana
Um,
Voss. Mariana Voss. Mariana
yeah.
Voss. Love her so much. So exciting to see. I mean, her NPFP, we've talked about this already in the season, but like to see her racing at the front, to see her sprinting at the front, like
Yeah.
truly showing that, you know, she is still a force to be reckoned with. She has an infinity contract with that team, which I freaking
Hmm.
love. That was just announced a couple weeks ago, and it's probably my favorite thing that I've ever seen. Like we know she's probably already thinking about retirement. It's probably coming in the next couple years if we're being realistic. But the infinity contract is just the greatest thing ever. Like what an amazing like feat as a woman cyclist.
Totally. Okay, so that brings up Des Linden. I don't know if you listened to Des and Kara this week, right? Like Des kind of had the same thing with Brooks. And actually, what I loved about Des was she said she took out the ad herself, so there was no bias from any of the brands. But that gives Mariana Voss like it gives you this like confidence and competence to like do what you want with your career. And we've always, not always, but we often give this to males, right? And so like it's great to see it now happening with women. And you know, it was so save the 10,000. I don't know how Kara and Des did it all, like from Boston to recording their podcast to debriefing like Des's last Boston, which, oh my, I like, want to talk about teary?
Waterworks, yeah.
Waterworks. But I loved how Des then had permission to just give it her all because it wasn't about the result, right? It was about Des showing up to be the best version of herself. And oh my gosh, did she ever go out on top on Boston, as we already talked about.
Oh, yes, 100%. Okay, then let's shift into running. Before I let you go into the very fast track stuff to longer things, Ultrarunner
Yeah.
Megan Eckert, new 6-day women's world record with 603 miles. Okay, so for context, I'm going into a 100-miler in like 2.5 weeks. And, you know, my hope is that, like, oh, I'll be done in under 24 hours. Um, she did 6 of those back to back to back to back to back to back. Um, just incredible, incredible. And other incredible things, 48-year-old Ana Laura Fray wins Toronto Marathon women's title. Like, holy smokes. Just again, you know, back to our Voss point, Voss is not 48. I think she's actually 38, though, 37 or 38. I think she's my age. Um, we can do this stuff for a long time.
Well, for a whole host of reasons. Actually, the shoes have made it better. The bikes being designed for women has made it better. The cross training. I actually just looked up the men's record. So we are starting to find some convergence on this like 6-day record. So the men's record is 650 miles. The women's record is 600 miles. I actually wrote it down and the thing is 970 miles. So like I just aspirational ladies, someone's going to do it. Someone will at some point over 6 days run like 900 miles. Um, Speedier stuff. Let's talk about our, I'm going to call her our co-author. It's not our co-author at all. It's your co-author.
I mean, it's our strong girl talk, yeah, author, anchor, occasional anchor, whatever we want to call her, the amazing Misha Powell. Yes, she is over in China now for World Athletics Relays. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, for her, this is really exciting. In her book, Sprinting Through Setbacks, one of the chapters, the one on belonging, is about her getting the gold medal in the team relay at the Commonwealth Games. So for her, this is, you know, kind of a return to that relay format that she has really thrived in. You know, she is like an individual 400-meter runner, but I think the relay really is where she shines. I
Oh my
mean,
gosh, relays
you've
are the
met her,
best.
right? Like,
Well,
if there's someone who brings good energy to a situation, it is Misha Powell.
well, and so this is where like World Athletics used to have longer distances. So they used to have the 4x8 and the 4 by a mile at World Relays. And so like as a distance person, okay, the 4x8 was my favorite event at U Sports every year. But okay, back to World Athletics. There's the introduction. So there's the 4x4 mixed relay, and then they're introducing a 4x1 mixed relay. And there's like some controversy around it because like 100 is like, I watched Grand Slam track again this weekend. It was awesome, but it like the 100 is like cuckoo bananas fast. Like it is an amazing amount, like talking power. It is an amazing amount of power coming down the track. And so it'll be really interesting to see the exchanges. Okay, I love because I'm Molly's like, what are you talking about? So exchanges are like the most important part of the 4x1. And so it's to keep the baton moving at a constant, consistent speed so that it's not decelerating and accelerating. Which is actually why the 4x1 men won the Olympic gold last year when like that whole US thing. Anyways, but I'm really excited to see this happen, to see this new event introduced. We know it's coming to LA 2028 as well. So yeah, I will have to figure out. I'm getting on an airplane to Australia Saturday at 6:40 p.m. I got to figure out how I actually watch World Relays. Well, it's a 23-hour flight, Molly. It's a 23-hour flight.
Oof. I don't even know how to respond to that. That's awful. That's just awful.
Awful.
Yeah, good luck. Godspeed.
Okay, let's talk Grand Slam track. Did you
Yes.
follow any of it this weekend?
You know me. I want
No.
to. I have desire to, but I had my last two big training runs this weekend, so I spent the weekend either working or running. So sadly, no track
No.
for me.
And petting DW's belly. Like, let's just be realistic.
Yes, and petting DW's belly. You're right.
Okay. So I can only watch Friday. So, hey, Grand Slam track, can you, like, if I have a Flow Track or CBC, like, I can't watch it in another country. So you can then only, yeah. And actually, same thing with Flow Sports and trying to watch the Vuelta. Anyways, sort all that out later. But really great races once again. Sydney McLaughlin is leading the overall results. She's got 48 points. She's won every one of the 4 races that she's entered. It was cool to see some challengers step up this weekend. Agnes Nagetich, who broke the 10K record on the road 2 weekends ago. She won the long distance. So like she's on a tear. I love it. Yeah.
Love
And
to see
then
it.
simultaneously, Des and Kara hosted Save the 10,000. So the 10,000 meter, I have run one. I think I'm one and done. 25 laps of the track. And it's a challenging event to get fans interested in. So once upon a time, there was the night of 10,000 PBs over in the UK. And it's it's effectively advertised as a party. And there's like literally the beer tent that the runners go through. And I think there's an opportunity to do something like this in North America, knowing that there's so few opportunities Des and Kara put together this event. I think it's got potential, but I think it's only got potential based on what happens with the 10,000 and how we make it like marketable and approachable. Because, like the fastest women are fine breaking 30, but still 30 minutes watching people run loops around the track. Like,
Yeah. I
you
mean,
gotta really love it.
Yeah, yeah, because I was about to be like, it's kind of akin to cyclocross because it is in terms of time. I mean, it's shorter than cyclocross even, but cyclocross just has a lot more stuff going on each lap.
Totally.
So, yeah, it's not quite comparable. I mean, I think a lot of that though does come down to like how good is your announcer? How good are the snacks? How good is the beer garden? Like, I think, yeah, if you can make an event out of it, and I think you can make an event out of anything if you are willing
Agreed.
to put the money in. And I mean, honestly, we were, track, if I think back to Canadian Track Nationals last year, the racing was great. The announcing, like on the track, medium, hard to hear, even though the station, like, the stadium's full. But if you can't hear what's going on, if you can't really like, be part of that and like get all these like inside details about the racers, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we watch this stuff on TV and the announcing is usually really good. They do have a lot of chatter going, but if they don't have that live, it really loses something. So, yeah, I think a lot can be done here. It just, yeah, needs better PR, needs better stories.
Oh, precisely. I was like, we just need a storyteller like you. So actually on that, I went down to the States to watch my stepson play Ultimate Frisbee this weekend.
Love that
Ultimate's
for
like
you.
one of these like super cool sports where like it's really accessible to like everybody and anybody. But they did such a good job at like telling stories. So Sunday, super nerd coming out. You're just gonna absolutely start laughing at me. It was May the 4th. Like May the 4th be with you. Star Wars Day. And they had like it was a fully Star Wars themed game. right? And so instead of singing the anthems, they had like a Star Wars anthem, right? But they told stories about the players and they involved the kids in the stands. And so yeah, there were points scored, and I fully was there to like be the number one cheerleader for my stepson, maybe number two, maybe dad was number one. But it was just that's how you get people to lean in. And I know, having, watched it online, that they do a great job at telling the stories about ultimate and how the players are like not giving back to the community, because that's not what it's about. Like for them, it's like actually like interacting with the community and like going to play with like youth leagues and their feeder system and how they relate to the schools, and like that it just becomes so much bigger than this one game.
Ooh, I love it. And I say that as someone who typically kind of scoffs a little bit at the concept of ultimate frisbee.
What?
But
Tell me more. Tell me more.
oh no, it just seems incredibly goofy. But I am really coming around on it. And, we'll have this conversation in a couple weeks, or we had it already. It'll be posted in a couple weeks when we were talking to our fangirl moment. Juliet Starrett was on the podcast, and we talked a lot about, what youth sports can look like. And I think, you and I have talked about it ad nauseum, fun. And if there's one thing Ultimate Frisbee is, it's fun, and it's an invitation to sport for the kids who are not into sports. It is
Totally.
an excellent, like, it's where the nerdy kid can go and fit right in. It's, you can be LARPing in the field 1 minute with your friends, and then you can get into an ultimate game still in your LARPing costume, I feel like, and it will just be respected.
Okay, fun fact, Ultimate Frisbee was actually where I figured out I was probably still pretty good at running. So I was playing Ultimate Frisbee in the Toronto leagues, and so off the pole, which is where like the defense throws it down to the other team, I could sprint all the way down and actually, like, depending on how they threw the disc, actually catch it out of the air, or be right there when like the first throw was done. And I just remember, and I'm like, I could cover guys, and I just remember being like, okay, I think I can. Anyway, still run, but and then often like girls don't show up, right? Girls face more barriers when it comes to sports, so I would often play the whole game with no breaks. So you'd be sprinting for an hour and 40 minutes on it, like Tuesday and Thursday night in the like dead of the heat of summer. So yeah, that actually, to give ultimate, like that's really where I found that I was probably still pretty good at track field.
It does actually make you kind of wonder if that actually would be great cross training for even a master's track athlete, but especially youth track, right? Like gives you a fun thing to do, maybe even this in the summer when like there's not necessarily like a school season that you have to be playing. And I think this is where parents can really be thinking laterally about like what are other options for my kid during the summer. I don't want to put them in like a really intense track program, but I don't want them to lose everything that they've, spent all year working on. Ultimate's probably a really good option. So I love that.
Functional movement, Juliet, right? Squats, lunges, moving, twisting, lateral movement, right? Like we are seeing the rise of like injuries in youth sport from repetitive motion, and because they actually just don't have like that like body awareness. And so yeah, ultimate, I would say gave me like that robustness to like stay relatively uninjured, aside from this knee, which I still haven't figured out how I did it. But it then gives you this like functional ability to move in a really fun way.
Absolutely. Okay. And then before we get into our actual conversation today, the one research-based thing that I did want to double click on that you and I pretty much sent each other at like the same time, was this new study that just came out about the fact that the majority of high-level athletes surveyed believe that the current treatment of DSD, differences in sex, athletes who wish to compete in the female category is unfair. So, if you haven't listened to our conversation on sex testing and, world athletics, definitely go back and listen to that to get the kind of like whole story around that and our hot takes on it. But I am so heartened by the fact that this survey points out that the high level athletes think that this is crap.
It's not only, so I will be honest, I actually had a chance to read it yet, but Alan Williams, who I've written some other stuff with, and Georgina Stebbings are both on the paper. I think it's that it shows thoughtfulness, right? And I think it shows that one of the best things that we need to do, right? And all the stuff that I do with youth sport is we need to actually ask the people who are competing, hey, What do you think? And I think that's what it's getting at. And yes, absolutely, we need people at the top who are like looking at this from a high level for sure. But it's also about the people who are in it, right? The man in the arena, right? Brené Brown, right? I don't want to be Statler and Waldorf. I want to be in the arena with everybody,
I,
listening to everybody's voices.
I want to be Statler and Waldorf, to be honest.
Really?
I mean, my God, the Muppets sitting in the balcony
Okay,
just
fine, fine.
heckling? Yes, yes, I do.
Okay,
Um,
okay, fine, fine. But
that's the
like,
dream.
it's my favorite place actually to sit at the ballet. Um, Not to heckle the dancers or the symphony, just so everyone's like, do you go and heckle the dancers? No, I love the ballet.
I'm like, Sasha, can
But
you take me to the ballet? You probably shouldn't take me to the ballet.
I love
The
the
urge,
ballet.
the urge to heckle from a balcony would just be too great for me. I wouldn't be able to help
Oh my
myself.
gosh. Okay, Heather Ogden, I am like fangirling you because we're talking about ballet. But again, going back to like listen to the athletes. And so I'm excited to read this paper. I've read some other research this week that's been like really empowering, really thoughtful. So it's great to see this out here. It's great to see that it got published. I think it's great to see it got published in a time of like academic uncertainty and political uncertainty as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I will just say the other cool thing is like this didn't show up in my inbox or in my search because I was specifically looking for it. This showed up just from like I get the PR stuff from just Wiley. And this was their top thing this week.
Yeah.
So I was really just excited that that came to me strictly as just like, oh yeah, here's just generic, like the headlines that we think are the most important headlines this week. Done. Yeah. So I am so excited to get into today's episode. We have Kelly Brush, the executive director of the Kelly Brush Foundation, which is a foundation that basically helps connect athletes with adaptive sports equipment. And when we talk about the importance of access, the fact that sport is a human right, all of that stuff, so often we are leaving adaptive athletes out of the conversation because, frankly, a lot of the time, people just think that it feels too difficult to include them in the conversation, which is crap. So,
Um, I'm giving my shout out and my fangirl moment to Archie Allison. He runs Variety Village here in Toronto, Ontario, and he does so much work for adaptive athletes, both in the GTA and across Canada. And to your point, you're right, right? Like this is a lot of what the research that the lab I work in looks at is like, how do we make the sports system more inclusive? And it's bringing these voices in. But I think one of the things I've learned over the last couple of weeks that it's actually so much easier than you think. And just say yes, right? I think you heard that in your interview, right? Just saying yes to the adaptive athletes and bringing them in. You'll figure it out along the way. Everybody will make mistakes, but no matter what, you'll have fun.
I love it. I love it. And I mean, yeah, shout out to Variety Village. Like as we're talking about that, I was there for the first time 2 years ago. Actually, it's where I met Misha Powell. So we were recording our first ever interview for the New Balance Run Your Way stuff that I was working on with Canadian Running Magazine. We were supposed to meet at an outdoor track, and she had picked this one, over, wherever that is in Scarborough. And so we get there and it's locked. And I'm like, I had gotten there early and realized that it was locked. And I'm completely panicking. I just go on my phone. I'm like, tracks, like indoor tracks. And it turns out Variety Village is literally like next door. So I phone them and I'm like, practically in tears because I'm like, oh my God, this is like the first project I'm doing at this. Like, oh my gosh, I want this to work out. And they were so lovely. They're like, oh yeah, and we don't have like no one's really in right now. So yeah, come on in, you can record, no problem. And when I got there and just kind of like got a quick glance at what they were doing, the stuff that they have there, I mean, Variety Village, like look it up if you haven't seen it. It is the dream for adaptive athletes. It is a gym that has really thought through how adaptive athletes and anyone else can come and train together. It is just so incredible, so touching, and just the coolest thing, right? They have an indoor track, and you're like running around the track. You're also then seeing a 95-year-old race walker just sending it around the track, someone with a hand cycle going around, like the, hand wheelchair, like going around the track like that. All these different like walkers and like all these different mechanisms for getting around the track, all these different modalities. It is so cool to see. Yeah, it's just really a great place. And I think that's, the kind of thing that Kelly Brush is trying to really make accessible for any adaptive athlete, especially one who doesn't live in an area where this is, readily accessible. And, we joke about running being like the, lowest barrier to entry sport, but then the more you get into it, the more you realize that it's really not, at really most levels. But definitely, for athletes who require adaptive equipment, we always say like the first step to getting to sports shouldn't be, hitting buy now on a bunch of stuff. But for adaptive athletes, it has to be. That's the option. That's how you get into sport for them. So making that accessible, making that possible is so, so important. And yeah, I mean, yeah, one thing Kelly really stresses is just that invite them in. Like it just makes no sense to continually kind of have to see them as, adaptive athletes in this other category that like isn't your problem. It's not easy all the time, but often like there are ways to integrate adaptive athletes into your teams. And one thing I loved that we talked about was, oh, you're the high school basketball team. Obviously, a wheelchair basketball player cannot necessarily play a game with the high school basketball team. Can they practice free throws, layups? Can they do, strength training in the gym at the same time? Absolutely. So really thinking not just like, oh, well, they can't do one thing, so they can't do anything. It's like, how can you add them in even if it isn't for everything? So yeah, love this chat. Okay. Without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Kelly Brush and definitely check out the Kelly Brush Foundation online and, look in your area, see what's around. All right, let's do this. Kelly Brush on Strong Girl Talk. I'm so, so excited to have you. And before we get into all of these like in-depth questions I have, I wanted to get just like the quick overview of your story and how the Kelly Brush Foundation came to be. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks for having me. And yeah, absolutely happy to share about my story and how we started the Kelly Brush Foundation. So, I was always an athlete growing up. I was into every sport that I could possibly be in. Skiing and ski racing became my main focus and the one that I sort of excelled at the most. And I was skiing at a pretty high level. I was racing nationally and internationally, and then ultimately racing Division I in college. And when I was a sophomore in college, I had an accident where I fell and I hit a lift tower and broke my back, and I have a spinal cord injury now. So, obviously that was really jarring and a huge like change in how all of a sudden I was going to be able to do a lot of the things that I have always done and taken for granted. And I had to totally relearn how to live my life and figure out what I needed to do differently, what I couldn't do, what new things I could do. And through that process, I saw the importance of adaptive sports for me. So within the first couple of months after my accident, I was introduced to adaptive sports. I got on a hand cycle for the first time, which is just like a bike, but it has three wheels and you do it with your arms. Um, and I saw how impactful that was for me, how much it made me feel like myself again, how it gave me, the confidence to know that I could still be myself, that I could live the life I wanted to live, that I could have friends in the same way, I could socialize, like all of these things that you so take for granted that all of a sudden are totally thrown into question. And that was so hugely impactful for my recovery and getting back to being who I am in my life, that I wanted to make sure that was possible for other people with spinal cord injuries too. I was really lucky that I had a huge network of people who rallied around me right after I got hurt, and we wanted to harness that energy and make something good come out of my accident. So we started the Kelly Brush Foundation right after I got hurt, to help people with spinal cord injuries get out and be active and break down those barriers, and allow them to find all the benefits of being active as well, which are great for anybody, but after having a disability, they take on that much more importance. And give so much. So that was in 2006 when I got hurt. So it's been almost 20 years now. We were really small for a long time, and it's been the last 10 years or so that we've really decided to try to grow, and we've done a lot in the adaptive sports world since then. And are trying to do more and more every day, and we're doing that in lots of different ways that I can get into. But that's how we started the Kelly Brush Foundation. That's kind of where I am now. My sort of like where I am in my life now, I live in Vermont, and I'm married. I have two girls who are 6 and 9, and we're getting them into sports, which is really fun. I worked for about 10 years as a pediatric nurse practitioner, and then recently left that job, and I'm doing work with the Kelly Brush Foundation full time now, because we've gotten so much bigger and we're doing so much more. It's demanding a lot more of my time, which is great. And I like to be active in all sorts of different ways that I can be. And some of my favorites are right. Skiing has always been one of my favorites. Mountain biking is a close second right now. So
Well, you're in the right place for it, I think. So, yeah,
very much so.
that
Yeah.
tracks. Also, I have got to send you the new Shred Girls book for your girls because they're just the right age for it. Oh my goodness.
Awesome. Yes, I would love that. That would be great.
I love it. I love it. So, I mean, I have so many follow-ups to that. First of all, I mean, when I'm hearing your story, the thing that I keep thinking about is just like how courageous it was for you to kind of put your name, put your face on this foundation at a time where you're kind of relearning like how to live your life. Like, what was it like in that kind of early phase? And I mean, how has it felt for, my gosh, 20 years of this? Like, that's so much.
Yeah. Honestly, when I first started the Kelly Brush Foundation, I was so like ignorant. I don't even think I really thought about it all that much. Like I was a 19-year-old
I think
college
that's the
student,
best
and I
way
was
to
like,
do something like this, honestly.
totally. And it was like Kelly Brush Foundation, sure, that sounds great. Like this seems like it's gonna make a big difference for a lot of people. Let's do it. So I didn't honestly really like calculate it that much. Now, obviously, like in certain circles, people know the Kelly Brush Foundation more than others, right? Like where I live in Vermont, we're a very small community. Like people know my name as Kelly Brush more often. And so like I get tied and associated with my foundation a lot more often, which is both great. And then sometimes is like, people know who I am in a way that I'm like, I don't know who you are, so it's like a little bit funny. My daughter at one point asked me if I'm famous, and I was like, no, but maybe in like very, very small circles.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
So yeah, they're very sweet. But the thing about it is that the Kelly Brush Foundation and KBF, I also refer to as KBF, so I'll
I
do
feel like
that.
that's probably really helpful for you almost. It's
Yes,
like,
very much so. Yeah, like disassociates a little bit. But um, you know, we do so much good and there's so much that's positive that comes out of it that I just have a lot of pride when it comes to that and what we've been able to do. So it's I think that's like the biggest feeling that I have when I think about KBF, when I have it associated with my name, is just how much good we're able to do.
yeah. And I mean, let's maybe just kind of like list out kind of some of the offerings program, like what exactly the Kelly Brush Foundation does, because I feel like there's a few kind of main pillars of it now.
Yeah. Our biggest and longest running program is we have a grants program that helps people with spinal cord injuries purchase adaptive sports equipment. So, adaptive sports equipment is really expensive, and this is equipment that you need to participate in a sport. So, it's a bike, it's a monoski, it's a wheelchair that's specifically designed to play tennis or basketball or rugby, because you can't really play in your regular, everyday wheelchair, or at least not at any level. Any higher level or without, breaking it or whatever. So all of this adaptive equipment is out there, but it's really expensive. I mean, like a very, very basic level, entry level hand cycle is $2,500. To get into skiing, you're looking at like 5,000 or more. And a mountain bike, you're looking at 10,000 or more. So we have a grants program that helps people with spinal cord injuries purchase this adaptive sports equipment. We've given out over 2,000 pieces of adaptive sports equipment. That's all over the United States, in all 50 states, to all sorts of different equipment. So that's our biggest program. We're giving away almost $1 million a year in adaptive sports equipment, which is really awesome. And that breaks down just the huge barrier of being able to access these activities on your own terms, having it in your garage, being able to go out with family and friends, and do whatever you want with this equipment whenever you want it.
Love it. Love it. And I mean, it's funny, you say 2,500 for like an entry level hand cycle, and my bike brain goes to being like, oh, that's actually like not that expensive. But then you think about like when you first get into cycling, your bike is like $100. You got it from Walmart, you got it used, you like got it free on Facebook, like whatever. Yeah, most people don't hit the $2,500 mark until they're like quite high level or quite serious about their sport. But you're talking about just to do it.
To just do it. If you want to go bike around the neighborhood with your kids, which is a huge number of the people that we help, you need to spend $2,500 for that. And that's the equivalent of the $100 Walmart bike. Yeah. And so it's a huge, huge gap for sure. So yeah, it makes a really big difference to be able to help to support and allow people to get access to that equipment, and have that.
Yeah, and it occurs to me that, we often talk about sports like running as being kind of like, oh, they're accessible to everyone because all you need is a pair of running shoes. And I'm now thinking, I'm like, oh, there aren't really any sports that are just completely accessible to someone who's in a wheelchair. Like that's just not like yeah, rolling is slowly down a
That's right.
smooth surface is pretty much your
That's
top
right.
out.
That's right. And there's different things like you can play tennis in your everyday wheelchair, but like you're at risk of tipping over backwards because that's when you're playing, that's one of the things that you're going to be moving in that way, and then your chair's going to tip over. Where a chair for wheelchair tennis has a like anti-tip bar so that you won't tip over, right? So there's things like that like you can do it, but it's not going to be nearly as good. And it's not going to be nearly as functional. But yeah, there's not a lot of options. It's not the like go take a walk down by the beach with your running shoes or go for a run or whatever, right? Like yeah, there's almost always equipment that you have in order to participate.
Yeah, it's funny because it is like very counter to normally when I talk about sport, I always kind of get on this like little rant where I'm like, I hate when like the first habit that someone talks about with, oh, you want to start, like you want to pick up running, like buy the new pair of running shoes. And like that's your step number one. And I'm always like, that's not your step number one. Your step number one is like going out and doing something in what you have. But in this case, the equipment actually really does dictate what you have access to. And I think that's such an important thing to underline because I think that's just so missed when we kind of casually talk about all this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And then one of our other programs that we have is camps. We call them camps, and these are activities that we do where we bring people. We do them all over the country. We bring a small group of people together, anywhere from like 8 to 25 people together, to sort of like intensively do either one sport or sort of like multiple sports in one area. And the idea behind this program is that it creates a lot of camaraderie, which creates community, which allows people to thrive in these sports in a way that's really different than when you're doing it on your own. So sometimes these camps, we're introducing people to these sports for the first time. Sometimes people are bringing their own equipment that maybe they got a grant from us to use this equipment, but they're coming to this camp and they're learning how to use it in a different way, or they're learning how to do it with a family member so that they feel more confident to like go out on the trails rather than just like stay on a paved path type thing.
Mhm.
Um, and we also, what we find from these camps is that like the confidence that builds by watching your peers do something is enormous. So going out and doing it on your own can be really scary, but then like going out, watching a friend do it and be like, oh my gosh, they can do it. I bet I can do it. And then trying that, you really get pushed. And then also just like the communication and the community that builds around shared life experiences. So for people with spinal cord injury or other disabilities, like having somebody else who's been through the same thing is so wildly helpful. And a lot of people don't have that in their day-to-day life all the time. You don't always have a community of people who have gone through something similar. So having sports as sort of the thing that brings people together to these camps makes it so that we can sort of like talk more openly and just sort of have fun. But then it always inevitably comes down to talking about our disabilities in some way. What do you do for this? How do you do this? What your wheelchair looks like this? Why did you do that? And we end up learning so much from each other. And we find that these camps are wildly impactful that way. And they're really fun because you get to do sports.
I love it. And it's funny because as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about being on women's group rides in cycling. And it's such a similar experience where, you're kind of chatting about whatever for the first bit. And then like by the end, you're like, well, what do you do when you have like some chafing— there? Or, are you using a menstrual cup? Or like it just gets really deep into like the stuff that we just can't talk about with other groups. They're just not going to get it. They
Totally.
can't get it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and it's so helpful to have that outlet. And we set it up in a way that like it's not like we're coming together and being like, here, talk about these things that you can't talk about with other people. But it inevitably happens when you bring them together and you make people comfortable doing something fun together, like sports or whatever. And we've found that those are really helpful. And all of our camps are a little bit different. So we hold them at different places around the country. We have different sports. We have different groups of people. So sometimes we'll focus on people who are more newly injured. Sometimes we'll focus on people who, we did all women one time, which spinal cord injury is 80% male, actually.
Huh.
The reason is men just do more reckless things.
Okay, so I was gonna guess that, but I didn't want to say it lest it be the
It is
wrong
just
answer.
the truth, unfortunately. Motor vehicle accidents are the number one cause of spinal cord injuries. And they just, I mean, it's just what it is. It's really wild, but that's the numbers. So when we get a group of women together, it's so powerful.
Oh gosh, I
Um,
can imagine.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so we do different things like that, and these camps are really, really cool and really
Yeah.
impactful for us.
So
Um,
you mentioned there that you have some of the camps that are for people who are kind of newly dealing with this. And I wanted to ask when you kind of like what you've seen, where is it, how do you, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. For you, getting back to sport was probably something that you almost felt like you needed to do to kind of come back to who you were, to your identity as this like high level ski racer. But for someone who, maybe they were very young when they suffered a spinal cord injury or, have just never really like grown up doing sports, sport has such, you know, is so life-changing from like a, physical, mental, emotional health standpoint. You know, how have you seen it for getting people who weren't into sports prior to getting injured, getting them like excited about doing it? Or is it almost in some cases easier because they don't have any prior experience with sport, so they don't have like a comparison that they're like basing off of their old self?
well, you touched on a lot of very relevant topics because you're absolutely right. Like, and with every person who goes through this, it's going to be very individual. So some people, like I know one person who used to be a skier. He was a really good skier. He loved to do it. He came back to skiing and he was like, he was a higher level, so skiing was going to be really, so we talk about levels of injury, and that's like the amount of functional impairment you have, right? Are your arms involved? Are your core involved? All of that. He was a higher level, so it was going to be harder for him to ski. He skied a few times and he said, nope, I'm not doing that again because it's so different. It's too hard for me to ski. But he found other things that filled that, and he loves those just as much, right? So it ends up being that you just have a different relationship with sport in a lot of ways. Um, uh, but I think for a lot of people, um, getting into sports is something that uh, is not made for the people who, let me start over. For people who um, haven't been into sports before their injury, sports can take on a whole different meaning. And very often they say, I'm not an athlete. I don't want to get into that. That's not sort of my cup of tea. But all of a sudden they realize how much that can give them. And And it's the small little things, right? It's biking around the block with their kids. And just that can be so wildly impactful for their all of the things we talk about, right? Like mental health. For somebody with a disability, it's often a lot harder to get any kind of exercise, just as we're talking about, right? The equipment isn't there. You do a lot of sedentary activities. To go bike around the block is huge for somebody, and really makes a difference in how they perceive themselves and how they live their life. So it's so individual based on sort of what your experience was before, but also can be, I mean, I've seen it time and again where getting into sports after an injury like this is totally game changing.
Hmm. Yeah, and I can just imagine, I know we have an example I wanted to talk about with an 8-year-old who's now being able to, able to play hockey. And I think especially for like really young kids with this, the default, I think, is unfortunately that they just don't get invited to play, right? Like there's no kind of automatic like, oh, hey, like it's gym class, so like here's kind of your sport and here's like we're gonna help you like kind of figure this out. It's a lot of just being sidelined, unfortunately. And I think even the way the perception of it is, I think, I think even parents tend to kind of like want to, you know, keep their kids safe in those situations, which unfortunately can kind of lean into like, okay, well, you can be a bookworm and that's great. And, I love a bookworm. I was a very inactive kid. Um, so yay to the bookworms. But the ability to access sport, I think, is just so hugely important. So talk to me about that. And let's talk about this 8-year-old because I love this.
Yeah. So I think this is the thing about uh uh especially somebody who acquires a disability, um, and all of a sudden has no examples of what it can look like for them to be active or
Hmm.
for them to have fun or do something that it looks like their body does. Because we don't see that in the world, right? We don't typically go to our local high school, track meet and see somebody who is doing it with a disability. Um, and because of that, we can't picture ourselves doing it and we just don't know. So what ends up being the biggest barrier is the knowledge barrier to getting into adaptive sports. People just don't see it, so they don't know about it. That's one of the big barriers that we're trying to break down at the Kelly Rush Foundation, right? Raise awareness about what's possible, about what's out there, and then make it possible for people to do that. Um, so this girl is a girl that we gave a grant to for a hockey sled. So she had applied to us because she was 8. She had this crazy, infection that led to an infection on her spinal cord, and then she was paralyzed when she was like 3 years old. And all of a sudden, her parents are there being like, "Oh my gosh, I'm all of a sudden we this little girl has like so many more challenges than we were originally thinking, right?" And there's all these questions about what's possible. And for them, they wanted to get her into everything that she possibly could and not limit her because she had a disability. And the thing that they found that was the most impactful for her was finding adaptive sports. And then getting her own equipment so that she could participate whenever she wanted was like the second most impactful, right? So that's when they came to us, applied for a hockey sled so that she could participate on her whenever she wanted in a sled that fit her well. And she's 8, and I got to, we got to do this, right? We were on a Zoom call together, and she was just like such a joy to talk to, and how much fun it was. She was, your classic 8-year-old who was just like bouncing off the walls, doing all sorts of things. But she talks about how much she loves to go to hockey practice, and how included she feels when she does that. And then I was asking her about school and like how it is with her friends there, and is it different? And she sort of like looked at me and she was like, "No, why?"
I love it.
And I was like, awesome. It's like it's this mindset. And I think that adaptive sports plays a huge role in it. Like, no, I'm not different than my classmates. Why would you ask me that? And I really believe that being able to participate in sports and being able to um, be a part of the same sort of like mainstream activities really makes a huge difference in how you understand yourself and how you understand how you fit into society.
100%. Yeah. I mean, we did an episode on this a few weeks ago where we talked about how, the UN talks about sport being this universal human right. And it's something that you just wouldn't necessarily think about or think of until you're kind of confronted with examples like that and you start realizing, oh, sport actually does have this huge power for community and confidence and competence. And actually, I was talking to a sports psychologist, and she was saying that, the three key factors of motivation are, autonomy, competence, and community. And sport provides all three of those. Adaptive sport provides all three of those in an even, deeper and more needed kind of way.
Yeah. Yeah, it totally does. And I think the yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think the value of adaptive sports that's like even greater is because it's so much harder to access. Right. And so when you do then access it, when you do have a chance to be on a team or to see somebody else doing the same thing you're doing, or to do it with them, it's so incredible and it's so like eye-opening that you just that it, I think it just amplifies all of those positives that come out of sport generally.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, there's all of these discussions right now around, gender equity and equality in sport and what that looks like. And, even, broader than that, access for all different, whether it's socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, all of that. And I think often we maybe throw disability in there or adaptive athletes in there, but do we actually do anything for that category? Because it's like a little easier to be like, oh yeah, we have, XYZ to like make this more, comfortable for girls. Like we have a woman coach and like we've got a few uniform options and those are all very important things, but they're pretty easy to do comparatively speaking. So
Yeah.
talk to me about, how this looks, when we're talking about equity in sport, we have to actually be actively addressing adaptive athletes. How do we do that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think you're 100% right. Like we talk about it a lot, but it's actually like hard to do. And there's a lot of reasons that it is, right? Because there are barriers like the equipment, right? If you don't have the proper equipment, it's really hard to do a lot of the times. And then it's like, well, how do we get that equipment? Who needs it? What if there's nobody that needs it now? Do we buy it anyway? Right? So there's a lot of questions that go around that. One of the things that we have found in the adaptive sports world, which is both a great thing and a bad thing, right, is that there are all of these adaptive sports programs around the country that are built and designed to help people with disabilities, all sorts of disabilities, right? So whether it's physical disability, cognitive, developmental, all kinds of things, that are built to help people with disabilities access sports, right? And be participate in adaptive sports, which is awesome. The negative of it is very often they're siloed to their own thing. So you have
100%.
to go to this adaptive program to participate in adaptive sports rather than it being so integrated into our already built networks of sports. Now, there's certainly some reasons, right? So like you take a typical, school district, you're not going to necessarily have a huge percentage of folks in that district that are going to need some adaptive component. That's going to need to be, like I'm talking about physical disabilities, right? So something that has like an equipment base, right? So it's like harder to really build around that when you have such a small percentage of people who need that. Um, so there's reasons why it was built this way, but I think one of our biggest opportunities is integrating things, especially with schools, integrating adaptive sports into schools and school programs. Um, we had another grant recipient of ours who is from Michigan. This is a young girl. Her name is Maria. She was awesome, and she applied to us. for a racing wheelchair, which is like what you use in a marathon, right? It's your equivalent of like running, right? And you use it for track and field and stuff like that. So she wanted to be on her high school track team. Um, Michigan's a big enough state that they have this, and they have an adaptive program or an adaptive category. So it was awesome because we were able to help her get this racing wheelchair, and participate on her high school track team. She was not siloed. She was like on the team. She was competing with her able-bodied friends in the adaptive categories. And it's a big enough state that there's other people on other teams that were also in these adaptive categories that they could race against each other. And it was so cool. And it's so awesome when it happens like this. Now, the like side story of that was that there was then some like issues with the regulations that they had within the state. And I'm gonna like not get it all right. So I'm like not like definitely don't quote me on exactly what this is, but there was something about the qualification standards, and she wasn't able to like go to states because of how it was set up, which was hugely disappointing for her, right? And she was doing really well and all this stuff, and so she was really disappointed. So she's become an advocate in trying to change these rules within the state. And I mean, talk about confidence, right? That you're like now, I think she was a senior, so like a 17 or 18-year-old kid who's like, I'm going to change the rules in a big state of Michigan. Like, how cool is that? So it's really awesome. It's seeing her gain that confidence, but also seeing her be able to be integrated into sport and into her team, like shows that team, shows the state, shows everybody who sees this that adaptive athletes can be part of our general society, can be entwined in, the sports community in the same way that anybody else can.
Oh, I love that so much. And I mean, talk about we always say, when you play a school sport, it really improves your like leadership and all of that. And like this could not be a better example of how that works. Um, it's
Totally, totally.
huge. And I think that hits a really important point of like, integrating into the school sports system. And I think a lot of the time we kind of see this as like a binary, right? Like it's you can play or you can't play. But can there also be this like middle ground, right? Like, can a wheelchair basketball athlete, like, yes, go play with the adaptive team, you know, after school, but like, can they also practice with the team on some of the stuff, right? Like, obviously, not everything is going to be like a one-to-one like lineup thing, but like, I'm pretty sure they can still, practice shooting layups and things like that together. Like, there's no reason that that can't be a thing. So I think there is like this call to, okay, you know, it doesn't have to be exactly perfect where it's like this fully integrated thing, but like, how can we bring this together?
Yes. Yeah. And I think if we approach things with the view of inclusion rather than exclusion, you will find those ways that you can have that similarity, right? Like you're 100% right. That person is not going to be playing in the games. We know that. That's fine, right? And hopefully that person, like you said, has a team that they can go play on, a wheelchair basketball team that they can play on. But like, let's include them in their after school program, or after school sports, right? And they can do passing, they can do free throws, they're going to do different, and then there's going to be certain times when they're doing a different drill on their own on the side, right? And then they can be involved in the team in different ways that keeps them involved in that team, right? Maybe they're like a team manager so that they travel to all the games also, right?
Mhm.
That sort of stuff so that they're still there. That's actually sort of when I was in college, that's what I did. So I got hurt as a sophomore, and as a junior, I was like, I still want to be on the ski team. Now, I couldn't ski yet. I hadn't learned how to mono ski, and I wasn't going to be racing, but like all fall when our team was getting together to do all of our dry land and exercise and everything, I was the one like timing it, right? And I'm like the one who's like going through and telling them what they need to be doing when we're in the gym. And then I was doing my workout on the side, right? And I was doing all the arm stuff, and any arm stuff they were doing, I was doing the same stuff, but then I was doing things differently, right? So like that's how I stayed involved in my team, and I still called myself on the ski team for the my junior and senior year. I'm still in all the pictures. I was on the roster, right? But it was just different, but I was still included. And I think for me, that was hugely impactful because I could still be myself, right? I still wanted to get back and be like a normal college student. And everybody around me was like, yeah, great. Like it was not a question. Of course you're going to do that. Like that's great. We'll figure out how to make it work. And the more that we can do that and involve people, include people, the more that we see that as the opportunity, the better for those people and everybody around them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love inclusion over exclusion. Like at the bare minimum, like as our starting point, like what does it look like if we're including? And I think, yeah, you're gonna think up these things that you wouldn't think about if you're just kind of automatically siloing off. And weight room is like probably the most perfect example because pretty much every sport has some kind of like, weight room component, like dry land kind of thing that yes, everyone can do in some capacity.
Mhm.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah, totally, for sure.
Okay, so we have a lot of parents and coaches who listen to this. So I think what I wanted to ask too is like, how can they think about making their programs more accessible and like actively inviting everyone in? Because I think that's part of the issue is not so much that, like a lot of these, especially in club teams, let's say, where it's not like a school district where they have to kind of like figure stuff out. And, club teams can be a little more like casual and like figure stuff out kind of on the fly. So I think a lot of them aren't necessarily trying to exclude, they just aren't actively including. So how can they kind of make this more accessible and not just where they say, "Oh yeah, I mean no one's come and asked us, so we just haven't thought about it or invited anyone."
Yeah, totally. I think one of the best places you can start is looking in your community to see if there's an adaptive sports program within your community. And if there is, reaching out to that program and offering whatever it is that you can offer, right? Hey, we run a community basketball program. We don't have any adaptive athletes. We don't have any necessarily expertise in that, but we would love to include anybody who wants to be involved in that, right? And that's then going to this source of like, okay, oh, I know somebody. This is a kid who, whatever, right? And they can either connect people who they know then, or at least it's then on their radar of anybody who's going to that adaptive sports program, then they're talking about what are the other opportunities within the community. So that's one place that I would start. Go to an adaptive sports program. Sometimes that's based out of like if there's a local rehab or a local hospital, they have like a recreational therapy department there. Sometimes you can do it through that, and oftentimes it's just local programs. We have one of our other resources and programs that we have at the Kelly Brush Foundation that I haven't talked about yet is something called the Active Project.
Perfect. I was going to ask about that next. So
Oh, good. What a nice segue. So one of the things that the Active Project, the idea behind the Active Project is to create a resource where people can learn about adaptive sports. And so this is really sort of like your one-stop shop about learning about adaptive sports. And so this is going to be like, what are adaptive sports? Like, I used to like to play tennis. Can I do that? What does it look like? What equipment do I need? Like all of the different things. We have lots of videos on there, lots of sort of tutorial type stuff. It's also about where to do it. So very often, if somebody has an injury or acquires a disability of some kind, they come home and they're like, I have no idea where to start. On the Active Project, we have a whole map that shows other people with disabilities who have signed up who are on the Active Project, and also adaptive sports programs around the country. So we have over 300 adaptive sports programs all across the country that are on this map. So you can like zoom right into wherever you live and find out what's around there. This is one of those things that like seems like it should be so easy, and yet you just have no idea where to look and how to access this information. So our hope is that the Active Project will really be this place where people can go to start to learn about what's possible and what they can do. It's also a great resource for the able-bodied community who want to be allies but don't really know how to. So to this point of like, okay, I really want to involve people with disabilities in this program that I'm doing, but like, I don't really know where to start. if you use the active project, you can go onto this map and you can find either people with disabilities within your community, because there's certainly going to be those on there, but also these adaptive sports programs. And you'll be like, oh, this program is like right down the street from me, and each program lists out what different sports they offer, and there should be contact info on there and everything, and you can reach out that way. So it's a good way to learn about who's in your community, and how you can include other people, even if you're not, an adaptive sports program, but you want to offer that.
I love that because yeah, I think, the trickiest part to your point that you made there is like you can't really start an adaptive program without an adaptive athlete who needs the equipment because like you can't really just like I mean I guess you could theoretically if you were say like a mountain bike club that was big enough you could have a mountain bike hand cycle that was like available for demo or trial or something like that. But in a lot of cases where you need like a specific size of something it's a little bit trickier to just have that equipment kicking around.
And I usually recommend against that because it ends up sitting and collecting dust in such an unfortunate way, because you have such great intentions and yet you like don't know how to get that information out there. And there's a lot better ways to get people included. Now, sometimes that is really nice to have a piece of equipment that's somewhere where people know. Definitely a good thing in certain scenarios, but that's probably not the best way to like get your foot in the door of like helping people, gain access to it.
No, that actually seems more like that thing that I was talking about in the beginning of this episode, where I said the thing that really like ticks me off is when the first step to habit formation is buying the gear. The way to become more inclusive is not just by going out and purchasing the gear, unless it's for a specific person in your community who wants to.
That's right.
Be part of this.
That's right. That's right. Totally. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely right.
I love it. I love it. Okay, before we wrap up, let everyone know how they can, get involved and, if they don't have their own club where they're gonna like start looking this stuff up, how they can still be involved and help out and, donate to the Kelly Brush Foundation and help get more adaptive people on this very important sporting equipment.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah. So our website is kellybrushfoundation.org or kbf.org, both work. You can find us on Instagram, Kelly Brush Foundation, and on Facebook. And, there's a lot of different ways to be involved with the Kelly Brush Foundation. Of course, you can always go online and donate. That's wonderful. Great. But we have lots of different events across the country. So we have a couple bike rides that we do that we have as fundraisers, that we have a bunch of adaptive athletes that come and do with us. One of them is in Vermont in the fall. In September, one of them is out in the Bay Area in October. And then we have a few different virtual rides around the country. Those are our biggest fundraisers that are active. Those are super fun. So if anybody's local or wants to do those virtually, definitely get involved that way. And then we have different events that we do around the country that both are fundraisers, but also just sort of feature things that we do. So you can sort of see some of the work that we do and some of the awesome athletes that we work with. So checking out our website and checking out our social media, you can see all of that. And, anybody can always reach out to me. You can get me through our website, just through the contact us, and it'll get to me. But I love to be involved both in like, certainly if anybody has a new spinal cord injury, that's something that I love to do, is talk to people with new spinal cord injuries and their families, because there's so much that's possible out there, and so often people don't know. But also to just talk about what it is that we're doing and how you can get involved, and do our conversation today. How can I support people in my local community, and what else can I do? And I'd love to touch base about any of that. So.
Oh, I love it. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for chatting. This was so much fun and yeah, just so enlightening and I think really, really helpful. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I love that we're talking about this topic. I think it's great. So thanks.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Strong Girl Talk podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, definitely head over to wherever you listen to podcasts and rate, review, and of course, subscribe so you never miss another episode. And head over to stronggirlpublishing.com to check out all of the books by Strong Girl Publishing's authors, including Molly Herford, Misha Powell, and so many more. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.